Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. It is just me today. So I'm your host, Laura Deneen. And if you are new to this podcast, welcome. We really are about helping people move towards peace with their bodies. So we talk a lot about mental health and the intersection of mental health and body image. If you're in the state of Tennessee, we would love to see you through our sister company, Anchored Counseling Company. And if not, we encourage you to reach out to someone local to you if you're interested in seeking therapy. Today I was kind of thinking a little bit on my drive in to the office about what I wanted to talk about, and something that has been coming up quite frequently in my own life and in my practice is this idea of building self-trust and everything that entails. So I want you to take a minute and just notice what happens in your body when I use the term self-trust. So if you're newer to therapy, you might not have heard this term. Maybe you've been in therapy for a while and this is something that you've talked about with your therapist. And for the record, self-trust can exist in so many different realms beyond the context of body image, but we're going to be talking about what it means to trust yourself in the context of body image. So circling back to this request that I initially made, what comes up for you when you hold this phrase self-trust? Is there like a pit in your stomach? Do you feel a sense of shame or disgust or curiosity? So just notice that physical response that you have. So that's might be a sensation that you're experiencing in your body. Because oftentimes we live at such a fast pace in our society, and we don't necessarily slow down to even consider what it means to trust ourselves. So I really firmly believe that counseling can be wrapped up into a few different words, and one of those phrases is self-trust. There's a lot of grief work that happens in the therapy space. There's a lot of building our own internal wisdom, internal voice. And then there's also this concept of building a sense of safety within our bodies, within ourselves, within our relationships, and the sense of building self-trust. And so self-trust is really the ability to trust ourselves in a nutshell. So it's the ability to not only recognize our needs, but to meet our needs in a timely, consistent, and adequate manner. So if we slow this down a little bit, a lot of individuals come to the therapeutic space not trusting themselves. And they live in a place where their head might be over here, and it's so widely disconnected from where their soul and heart and bodies are. And so when you introduce this concept as a therapist to a client, you might kind of get like an eye roll or like, okay, this is therapy jargon showing up. Or just a look of like kind of like curiosity from a client of like, what even is that? And so if that's your story, I will totally validate that. And in the beginning of my therapy journey, I don't think that I could have described what self-trust is or was for me up until that point. But the beauty of therapy is really this idea of coming home to ourselves and building back trust within ourselves so that then we can show up well in the world, in our relationships with people that we care about. And so, essentially self-trust is the ability to recognize our needs and the ability to meet our needs in a timely, consistent way. And if you feel that you have walked away from yourself, essentially, or that you have essentially no sense of self-trust, I just want you to hear today that you are never too far gone. So we can always, always, always make our way back to ourselves, no matter what trauma, no matter what experiences we have been through. There is always an opportunity to build self-trust back. So if we circle back to this idea of meeting our needs consistently, if we dig really into that on a deeper level, even this concept of meeting our needs can feel foreign to people, right? So I mentioned this fast-paced society that we live in We're always scrolling, checking emails, looking at things, and we live in this kind of content saturated world. And so what can happen because of the digital world that we live in and because of AI and technology is we receive too many external inputs. And so that can really damage our sense of self-worth, where we might be overly relying on external inputs instead of paying attention to our internal bodily cues, which is one of the reasons that I asked you to notice what comes up for you when I use that phrase self-trust. So that's the first piece, is really looking at, like, do I even know what my needs are? So needs can really reference so many different things, from our emotional needs to our physical needs to relational needs, spiritual needs. If you believe in a higher power, there's all these different kinds of needs that we have in any given day. And so if we're going to start with this foundation of building self-trust, we have to start with the ability to recognize our needs. And then that dives us into even a deeper question of, do I believe that my needs are valid? So what can happen as we grow up? For example, take the person that maybe grows up in a family of origin where their needs are neglected or mocked or minimized or dismissed. When they turn 18 and they leave the home, they might really believe that their needs don't matter. And it's not that their needs don't matter, they just don't have any other point of reference for the ability to meet their needs. And they weren't modeled that growing up. And so lots of adults actually have to go back and really think about their childhood, think about the possibility of developmental trauma that they went through that might have led them to believe that their needs don't matter. And so that's the first kind of piece of feedback that I have for you is, what is your relationship to your own needs? Do you believe that they matter? Do you believe that they're important? Do you believe that other people's needs matter more than your own? And then practicing really an abundance of curiosity around that. And so typically that comes from somewhere, whatever your belief system is around your needs. But getting really curious about that, and getting really curious about the what, when, where, why, how your perspective on your needs themselves developed. And so this can be hard work for a lot of people because it does require rewinding the tape. And the purpose of this is not just to put you back into your traumatic past. I recommend doing this with a skilled therapist if it becomes too much for you to explore this on your own. There's certainly wonderful providers that can really walk alongside you, and we want to do this in a paced, loving way. We don't want to just like rush through our childhoods or become dismissive of our own experiences in and of themselves. So as we're talking about this concept of building self-trust, we have to explore what we believe about our needs. And that's a big question, and it can evoke a lot of emotion. It can evoke a lot of painful memories. And so I encourage you to definitely engage in this work with a therapist and get really curious about your history of meeting your needs. Is that helping you build self-trust, right? Because if you can't identify or meet your needs, then your self-trust might actually be suffering. And so that's really the foundation of building self-trust, is looking at what your needs are and looking at your ability to meet those needs. And the reason this matters so much in the context of body image is because we are always with our bodies, right? And so if we're able to maybe show up at work, but then are not eating all day, that's a problem. So we might be able to meet our professional needs, but then our personal needs might be suffering. And so what we're going for here is congruency. And what we're going for is really the reality that all of our needs matter, and that we can't just meet one of our needs without the other area of our needs suffering. And the reason this matters with body image in particular is a lot of people who struggle with body image concerns have trouble identifying their bodily needs. They weren't maybe taught to do this. Maybe you have a history of being shamed for your body whatever the shape was or its appearance, and that you learn through those experiences to neglect your body's needs. But this is one of the ways that we build self-trust, is first and foremost really looking at, do I believe that my bodily needs matter? And if I don't believe that, or maybe I have trouble meeting my needs, then that is a really important topic for you to explore in therapy. So, body image, we can't just expect to get better from our body image journey if we are not meeting our needs. And that's really important as we consider this topic of self-trust in the context of body image. And then I would encourage you as well to ask yourself if you have memories of times maybe earlier in your life when you did trust yourself. So maybe you have a memory of eating like an ice cream sandwich when you were 12 years old at the pool, and you really were wanting one of those with your friends, and you allowed yourself to enjoy that moment. Going back in time and looking at what were experiences that I've had where I really did trust myself, and getting curious about what that felt like for you. And even if you don't have a frame of reference historically for experiences around self-trust, like I said in the beginning of this episode, we're never too far gone to build upon those. And so one question that you might get curious about is asking yourself, what gets in the way of you building self-trust? Is your schedule too jam-packed? Are you back-to-back throughout the day and you have zero time to check in with your body and to check in with what it needs? Do you believe that your needs are not important? Do you have other people's voices in your head that maybe interfere with your ability to meet your needs? So if you grew up perhaps with a really critical caregiver and they did not meet their own needs, that was the only thing that was modeled for you growing up. And so, of course, as an adult, maybe you believe that your needs don't matter. And so really getting curious about what gets in the way of you building self-trust or practicing self-trust can also be a helpful question for you to ask yourself. One other question I encourage clients of mine to ask is, what helps you experience more self-trust? So I have found in my own therapeutic work that when I am living life at a slower pace, I can tend to like go, and I can be that person that like is always trying to achieve the next thing. And I recognize this about myself and have really done a lot of work around not shaming that part of me, but really getting curious about that part of me and what it might be connected to. And so when I am in a place of just like speeding 100 miles an hour ahead, I recognize historically that those are times when my self-trust has not been as accessible to me. And so really looking at what gets in the way of you building self-trust and then what helps promote self-trust. So seasons in which I have maybe met life with a slower pace, I recognize that those are experiences that I have when I am able to really lean into my own self-trust and my own internal wisdom. And so a lot of these words that we use in the therapy space are interchangeable because whether you call it self-trust or paying attention or your internal compass or your internal wisdom, they can mean the same thing. But essentially what allows you to pay attention, what allows you to trust yourself. And then lastly, one thing that I wanted to touch on in today's episode is really looking at your values. So what we know is that when our behaviors line up with our value system, there's more congruency in our lives. And so if you are wanting to build more self-trust within your body, within yourself, looking at what your values are can be one fruitful place to start. And looking at, do I even know what my values are? And are they lining up with how I'm choosing to live my life? Because if they're not, there's no shame in that, but that is something for you to explore either on your own or in the therapeutic context. And this idea of exploring our values can ebb and flow throughout our life as we grow older and as we go through more experiences. But our values are really what makes us ourselves and what allows us to live really meaningful, fulfilling lives. And so as we wrap today, I just really want to encourage you to explore your own relationship with your needs, to explore what might be getting in the way of you building self-trust, and then what helps you build self-trust, and to reevaluate your value system. Because as we're talking about body image, we can't expect to move towards more peace and acceptance of our bodies if we haven't also explored this additional layer of self-trust. And you can substitute whatever phrase or words feels helpful to you, but self-trust is something that I have really jived with in my own therapeutic journey. It's something that I'm consistently talking to my own clients about because I do think it allows us to really show up in health in our everyday lives. So thanks for being here for this solo episode. But yeah, as your homework, I want you to think about those 4 things that I just mentioned. So the needs, the interference with self-trust, what promotes self-trust, and then your value system as well. And then maybe as an affirmation, let's see here, maybe just tenderness. So I offer myself tenderness as I journey towards more self-trust. I love the concept of journeying because there's so much permission in it, and it doesn't mean that we have to like be arrived or that there's this like final point of self-trust. It gives so much permission for our self-trust to evolve, to look different in different seasons of life, and there's such a spirit of curiosity with that affirmation as well. So thank you so much for being here on the Becoming Anchored podcast. We will see you next time. Take good care.